Did you know that Verstappen's new Red Bull could be sabotaging his season? Although Max has won races, the RB21 is causing more headaches than joy. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, do you think this car is holding Verstappen back? What's wrong with Red Bull that's jeopardizing its F1 dominance? Today we're going to analyze the real problems with the RB21, Verstappen's car in 2025. Although it has achieved good results, there are technical flaws that could cost him the championship. The 2025 season kicked off with a panorama that few anticipated. Max Verstappen, four-time world champion and the central figure of Red Bull racing, continues to demonstrate why he is considered one of the most complete drivers on the grid. However, this year the challenge lies not with his rivals, but with his own car. The RB21, the team's new car, has generated more questions than answers since the first race. Although Max has managed to stay on the podium in 6 of the opening 9 rounds, the path has been far from steady. The car's performance is erratic. Sometimes it shines in qualifying, but its race pace plummets. In other cases, it fails to find balance even in free practice. For a team accustomed to dominating, this is uncharted territory. One of the keys to this unexpected turnaround is the change in technical leadership within the team. For the first time since 2006, a Red Bull car has been designed without the direct supervision of Adrian Newey. His departure to Aston Martin left a void that, although Pierre Watt has tried solidly to fill, has not been easy to fill. The difference is evident in the details. The RB21 seems to lack that invisible touch that always characterized Newey's designs. Watt opted for continuity in the aerodynamic concept, using last year's successful RB20 as a basis. But what was intended to be a safe bet became a source of conflict. The car does not respond well to the new technical requirements of the regulations, especially after the modifications imposed after the Spanish Grand Prix. The aerodynamic balance, one of the pillars on which Red Bull had built its hegemony, now appears inconsistent. In medium corners, the RB21 loses stability. On straights, it fails to achieve the expected efficiency. And most worrying, the tires suffer alarming degradation, especially when soft compounds are used in hot conditions. Added to all this is the fact that the Honda RBPTH003 engine, in its final year before the team becomes Red Bull Powertrain's Ford, has shown unexpected difficulties. Not in power, but in integration with the chassis. On hot circuits, the car's cooling system has been insufficient. The team even had to redesign the central radiator, diverting resources from more urgent aerodynamic upgrades. And that's where Verstappen comes in. His role has been much more than that of a simple Sunday driver. He has spent hours in the simulator, adjusting setups, testing new solutions, and working closely with the engineers to try to squeeze the most out of a car that seems unwilling to cooperate. His dedication is beyond question, but even the brightest talent needs a reliable machine. The current outlook, therefore, is uncertain. Red Bull remains competitive, but no longer dominant. McLaren and Ferrari have closed the gap, and they have done so at a time when Red Bull faces its biggest technical challenge in years. What was once a tactical battle on the track is now a race against time in the Milton Keynes workshops. All of this leaves one question: how long can Verstappen continue to sustain the team with his skill before the situation overwhelms him? And more importantly, can Red Bull regain the winning formula without its main architect? As the RB21 continues to display unstable performance, rumors have begun to emerge inside and outside the paddock. While initially seemingly mere speculation, they are now taking on a much more concrete form. And when it comes to Red Bull, Max Verstappen, and a car that doesn't live up to its promise, silence is no longer an option. Voices are beginning to rise, questions are multiplying, and leaks are quick to appear. The first source of tension revolves around the absence of Adrian Newey. His departure wasn't simply a technical transition, but the end of an era. Red Bull knew replacing him would be complex, but what they perhaps didn't anticipate was how dependent they were on his vision to anticipate and adapt to regulatory changes. Pierre Watt, now in charge of the technical department, has been under both the pressure and the responsibility to maintain excellence. However, his more collaborative, horizontal approach has yet to yield consistent results. Sources close to the team mention that there have been internal disagreements since preseason testing. Engineers faced technical dilemmas that were previously resolved with Newey's intuition and experience. Now, every decision goes through longer, more contentious, and more uncertain processes. And that, in an environment where every millisecond counts, is a luxury no team can afford. The car lost technical direction at the most critical moment, just as the FIA imposed new aerodynamic restrictions that required creative solutions. One of the most persistent rumors suggests that the RB21 chassis was born with suboptimal weight distribution. Although it's not a fault that can be officially confirmed, several analysts and former members of rival teams have suggested it after analyzing data from onboard cameras and public telemetry. This distribution would be affecting the way the car uses its tires. And herein lies one of the major problems Red Bull suffers from in 2025: degradation. Verstappen has openly stated this in several interviews. He must take extreme care of his tires, which forces him to sacrifice race pace. In a category where constant attack is key, driving with the mental handbrake on is a strategic curse. The car doesn't allow him to unleash his talent in key moments. And for a driver with Max's competitive nature, this doesn't go unnoticed. Rumors escalated even further after it emerged that the new aerodynamic floor, introduced in Miami, was only used by Verstappen. The team justified this as a controlled test, but behind the scenes there was talk of a lack of confidence in the improvement's real-world impact. Indeed, although it generated more downforce according to simulations, it also introduced new problems: instability in slow corners and erratic behavior during quick changes of direction. Another source of tension is the design's lack of flexibility. External engineers, such as those at McLaren, have pointed out that the RB21 reacts very abruptly to setup changes. This makes it a difficult car to adapt to different circuits. It's no coincidence that Max has excelled at tracks like Imola with high downforce, but has struggled at others that require a wider operating window. All of this has created a climate of increasing internal pressure. Christian Horner, despite his upbeat tone in the media, is reportedly facing internal questions about the team's technical direction. The arrival of new parts for the Spanish GP was presented as a turning point, but the reality is that a definitive solution is still not in sight. The team continues to develop, but the margin for error is narrowing race after race. At Red Bull, the public narrative has been measured, optimistic, and carefully controlled. Christian Horner, team principal, has repeated in multiple interviews that the RB21 is an evolving project requiring time and adjustments, but that it has the potential to be competitive. In theory, confidence remains intact. But behind the scenes, tension builds like an invisible burden beginning to weigh on the team. Since the Miami Grand Prix, when the first updates didn't deliver the expected results, Horner's statements began to change tone. He maintained his optimism, yes, but he also introduced terms like learning curve, progressive adaptation, and process underway. In F1, those words often translate to the same thing. Something isn't working as expected, but no one wants to admit it publicly yet. Pierre Watch, the car's technical manager, has been much more discreet. His style is more reserved, more technical, less media-oriented. However, in one of his few recent interviews, he acknowledged that the RB21 has potential, but we haven't figured out how to fully unlock it yet. He added that it's not an easy car to set up, and that every improvement seems to come with a new, unforeseen problem. A statement like this, coming from Red Bull's technical mastermind, doesn't go unnoticed. Internally, meetings at the Milton Keynes factory have intensified. Simulations are conducted daily, and wind tunnel tests are repeated with an unusual frequency for this stage of the season. The pressure doesn't just come from results. It comes from the fact that Red Bull knows it has the best driver in the world and can't afford to lose him due to a technical error. And that's where Max Verstappen comes in. Unlike previous years, this 2025 season shows him to be an even more deeply involved driver. He doesn't just drive on Sundays. He participates in technical sessions, proposes changes, analyzes data, and demands answers. He's involved in the process, as if he were part of the engineering team. This dedication isn't new, but it's more intense than ever. Because Max understands he's racing against more than just rivals. He's racing against his own team's clock. After the Monaco Grand Prix, Verstappen detected a pattern in the telemetry that indicated an anomaly in the car's rear suspension. No one else had noticed it. It was he who, after reviewing high-speed corners, identified an abnormal resonance that affected the car's stability under long braking periods. When the engineers replicated the problem in the simulator, they confirmed he was right. This isn't a minor detail. It's the kind of input you don't expect from a driver, but from a vehicle dynamics expert. Max has also spoken candidly to the press. In several interviews, he has said that the car doesn't allow him to attack the way he wants, that the tires degrade more than normal, and that you have to have perfect races to compete. These are not empty criticisms. These are precise diagnoses, formulated from the frustration of a driver who knows he could be winning more if only he had a better tool. Meanwhile, the team is trying to hold on to what it still has: time. The improvements planned for the upcoming races are aggressive. There's talk of a new, more efficient front wing, a complete overhaul of the exhaust system, and radical tweaks to the cooling system. All of this points to a single goal: giving Verstappen a car that's worthy of his driving. And while the public narrative remains one of confidence in the process, every race without substantial improvements fuels uncertainty. Max won't say it with words, but every gesture, every radio call during the race, every comment in the paddock conveys the same message: Red Bull owes its champion. The season progresses, and each race that passes without concrete solutions brings Red Bull a little closer to the brink of a structural crisis. The question is no longer whether the RB21 can win races, but whether it can sustain a full campaign under pressure from rivals who have closed the gap at an alarming rate. And while Verstappen continues to get the best out of an unstable car, all eyes are on what's next. Because the immediate future will be decisive. The upcoming Grands Prix, especially Canada and Austria, represent much more than just 2 dates on the calendar. For Red Bull, they are the stage where the effectiveness of the most aggressive updates of the year will be put to the test. These are not just fine-tuning adjustments. We're talking about profound modifications that seek to alter the car's basic behavior, something rarely attempted mid-season. One of the most anticipated changes is the new front wing. According to internal sources, this new design features narrower elements and an adjustable aerodynamic profile that would improve airflow to the side pods. This improvement not only aims for efficiency on straights, but also for improved load transition in mid-corner situations, which has been one of the RB21's weak points since the first race. Added to this is a radical modification to the exhaust system. Inspired by solutions seen on the Ferrari SF25, Red Bull engineers have worked on a complete redesign that allows for improved heat evacuation without sacrificing aerodynamic stability. This change is designed for circuits with extreme temperatures, such as Montreal, where the RB21 has shown worrying signs of overheating. But beyond the parts, the key will be how the car behaves in variable conditions. That is the big battle Red Bull faces now. It's no longer just about achieving a fast lap or optimizing a race strategy. The real challenge is expanding the car's operating window, getting it to perform well on both technical tracks and high-speed layouts, adapting to rain, heat, compound changes, and dynamic demands without a drop in performance. Christian Horner put it clearly: the goal of these updates is to build a more stable foundation for the remainder of the championship, because if the car remains unpredictable, every weekend will be a new experiment. And in a championship where consistency is the most valuable currency, one cannot afford to continue improvising. In parallel, Verstappen's work becomes even more strategic. It's no longer just about adjusting his style to the car's behavior. Now he must also adapt his mental approach to a season that demands patience, management, and surgical precision. Max has proven he can win under pressure. But winning with a car that forces you to drive by instinct and calculation at the same time is a demand that can have its limits, even for him. Internally, the team has restructured its simulator testing plan. Each weekend begins with a technical session that includes aerodynamic package comparisons, progressive load simulations, and thermal analysis in different scenarios. Verstappen participates in each phase, seeking to find combinations that mitigate the behavioral errors that recur in specific conditions. Their technical involvement isn't an additional resource. It's a necessity. And while Red Bull remains hopeful that these solutions will restore the RB21 to the competitiveness that would have made it untouchable, the truth is that the gap is narrowing. McLaren has improved with each race. Ferrari has found consistency. Even Mercedes has begun to regain ground. Red Bull's dominance is no longer a given. It's a memory that could fade if they don't achieve an immediate technical response. The coming weeks will define whether the 2025 narrative will be the story of a team that knew how to reinvent itself after losing its creative genius, or one of a progressive decline fueled by decisions that came too late. Every update, every telemetry data point, every adjustment in free practice will be part of a silent race being run behind the scenes. Because in modern F1, championships aren't won just on the track. They're won through preparation, through adaptability, through the speed with which a team detects its mistakes and reacts. In short, what Red Bull is experiencing with the RB21 goes far beyond a simple adaptation phase. It's a breaking point. The team that dominated with a firm hand for years now faces its most complex test, recovering its technical identity without the architect who built it. The post-Newey transition hasn't been smooth, and the consequences are clear. The car is fast, yes, but inconsistent. It wins in Verstappen's hands, but at the cost of extreme efforts, exhausting simulations, and absolute precision. There's no longer any margin for error. Verstappen, for his part, hasn't slowed down. He continues pushing as always. He continues working as if he were starting from scratch every weekend. But even for him, this kind of season comes at a price. We've seen it on his radios during the race, in his gestures after qualifying, in his long pauses when asked about the car. It's no longer just frustration. It's a silent message. The situation is not under control. And that's the big warning that many in the paddock are beginning to understand. It's not about Red Bull failing to win 1 or 2 races. It's about their star driver starting to look elsewhere if promises aren't kept. Ferrari knows this. So does McLaren. And while Verstappen is reserved, his decisions have always been guided by the purest logic of high performance. If he doesn't feel he can continue making history with Red Bull, he'll look elsewhere where he can. What seemed like a transitional season has become a minefield of technical, emotional, and strategic decisions. Every update, every weekend without improvement, every cryptic message on the radio can tip the scales toward an internal restructuring, or toward a possible breakup that, just a year ago, seemed impossible. The RB21 is more than an uneven car. It's the symbol of a team trying to reinvent itself without losing its soul. And at the same time, it's the test that will determine the limits of the patience of a champion who doesn't race to compete, but to build a legend. The immediate future is as uncertain as it is exciting. The next few races will not only determine whether Red Bull can salvage this season, but whether it can retain the driver who changed its history forever. And that's the story everyone is waiting to see. And that's precisely the question keeping the paddock on tenterhooks. Will Red Bull be able to regain control before Verstappen loses faith? Will we see a reborn RB21 or an isolated star fighting alone against a car that doesn't support him?